I got the MCTs. You got the mushroom. I got all the trendy beverages. I'm sitting on a crystal-laced infrared mat.
Oh, that's
I'm Indian
amazing.
style. I got my prayer beads. Every cliche Venice thing that you could be doing, I'm doing them all at the same time. So we are good to go.
I don't expect anything less from you, Aaron.
I appreciate that. I think. I woke up this morning and I went up to my roof and I bathed myself in pink Himalayan salt.
Oh, wow.
And then I howled at the sunrise I woke up my neighbors. They weren't happy about it, but we did it.
Nice.
It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good for your
like...
vagal tonicity. Also, it's good for the cervix.
Oh, really?
Good to know that.
Yeah.
It helps you, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I feel like my cervix is well toned at this point.
There you go.
Are you guys recording right now?
I'm recording.
Are we doing it?
Yeah, we are recording.
Yeah.
It's happening. It's all happening.
It's all happening. Welcome, everybody, to the Integrate Yourself podcast. We're your hosts, Allison Pillow and Maya Gottlieb. You can find me, Allison, at pureenergypdx.com, and you can find Maya at mayagottlieb.com. Today, we're here with Aaron Alexander of Align Podcast. He's a rolfer, and he's a movement specialist, and he's featured in many, many things, but his philosophy is all about movement. He has a Align movement method that he will talk about, and he's really big into posture. So we're going to get into that today as well. Thank you so much, Aaron, for coming on our show. Welcome.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to get to chat with you guys. Been looking forward to it. Let's
go ahead and jump right in, Aaron. What is the most important part of why you teach alignment?
So upon working with clients for professionally, it's been the last 14 years. And in that time frame, a lot of that, what I see come into my office or the gym or wherever it may be, we start to resolve some of those patterns through the sessions. And then I see those patterns start to re-manifest themselves upon the person coming back. And so that just gets tiring. You know, you start to feel like it just feels energetically drained. I was going to you start to feel like a prostitute, but that might be a little bit too far. But it just doesn't feel like the work that you've invested in that's contained. It just kind of spills on the floor once the person leaves. So the conversation that became more relevant is figuring out what are you doing in your day-to-day experience that's causing these patterns in the first place, and then how can we start to rework it more from like a mold perspective as opposed to just kind of continuing to feed people pills. Just because it's not a pharmaceutical drug per se doesn't mean it's not pharmaceutical drug-esque. You know what I'm saying?
So the habits create the patterns, and you want to help them find the habits that are helping them become less efficient. Yeah. So was there a backstory for you in terms of how you got into all this?
The story that I tell sometimes is a lot of like insecurity growing up. My dad started smoking crack, and I think I talked to you about that, Allison. I know I did. I'm pretty sure.
I haven't heard this story.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was kind of like around like 16 or so years old. Father started kind of getting a little funny, and ended up going to prison and all sorts of interesting things, which the story that I tell myself doesn't necessarily need to be accurate, but something that seems like it might have some sensibility is I started kind of like packing on muscle, and I got a job at the gym doing personal training and trying to get as smart as I could and as bearded as I could be and as just guarded and protective as possible. And so that was kind of like the beginning. So that's the way things go. Oftentimes when something kind of cataclysmic happens, it ends up actually making you become a better human being. And not to say that I'm a good or bad or anything in between human being, but I feel like I feel great gratitude for that experience because of that reason.
Yeah, there's a teacher that we both, Allison and I, know that talks about our parents teach us what we do not want in our lives. And so the helpfulness of that is that they're living the lives that they can. And then when you kind of look into what you're doing and how your values change as you grow out of that, is you find that they're teaching you what you do not want.
John Demartini talks about that. Is that the guy?
No, his name's John McMullen. We'll have him on the show when. Hey,
Johnny.
it's close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just did a thing with John Demartini. He's tremendous. I recommend he's got a thing called the Demartini method. And the big focus with him that I think is phenomenal. And I was pondering on this morning / like the last few weeks as I was just with him, is figuring out your values. So if you can figure out what your highest values are, all of a sudden that beats all the collagen protein supplements or vegan proteins or whatever you're into that you can possibly imagine. If you can drop in and figure out every day I wake up and like, I'm excited about this day, I need to be here in this world. That energetically, cellularly, physiologically, structurally, I think that's the biggest impact. And all of these other kind of prongs that we're speaking to from a structural perspective, nutritional perspective, spiritual perspective, relationship, business, they're all tied back to that one main trunk, which I think is, are you living in your values? Right. So it's structural integration, I think, is a bigger conversation than just bicep curls and elbows and glutes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot about the neurology that's coming out in the philosophy of that is that the physiology cannot change if your primal brain, your first brain, is working in accordance to you surviving. So if you're living in values that create this survival, it constantly brings you in a space of, I won't let my body go any farther because I'm not feeling safe of what you're doing. And so your vision, your vestibular then affects the movement pattern. So if you're constantly in a space of survival, whether it's low energy based on how your body is being fueled, if it's based on your community, where you are, you're always going to be somewhat affected by how that brain is going to interpret the inputs and outputs.
Yeah, Martini talks about he says, I believe he says you can either be in creativity or survival. So kind of like a binary type perspective where it's, if you're in creativity, you're in your flow. I was just with Jamie Wheel a few days ago, the guy from Flow Genome. I recommend looking into that. It's really cool getting into the science of all that stuff.
I think years ago I heard of him, but I never really got to experience a lot of what he was talking about. But it's definitely in alignment.
Yeah. I just want an excuse to shamelessly name drop. I'm going to continue to do that throughout the podcast.
Totally fine.
I'm glad you can remember them all.
Know.
It looks like you're in. How many podcasts do you have now? Like sessions?
157 was today, but I've recorded more like 200.
Wow, that's awesome.
Wow.
But yeah, so he talks about creativity and survival. So when you're in that, you could call it flow state, but that might not relate so much, but in your values, then you can start to express yourself more from a creative place, which that feels it feels uplifting. But most people we just don't get any education around how to manage finances would be an example, how to manage our health, how to manage just self-care for ourselves, how to manage our sleep, nutrition. We don't get any of that stuff. We learn how to be cogs in a wheel, and those cogs, they're not taught how to self-lubricate, how to, add oil to their own gears.
Right.
They just kind of assume you'll figure that shit out.
Yeah.
And so many people, they don't have any spaciousness in their life to express creativity because they're stuck in survival mode. So that's the biggest thing, I think, beyond anything, is communicating to an individual or group of people on how do we start to kind of whisper into this creativity realm. But to do that, you got to get the freak out of survival.
Right. And we're having a creative thinking crisis. I mean, a critical thinking crisis as well, I think, because people are just not... They're kind of, I find they need to be told what to do as opposed to taking the information in and seeing what that means to them based on their own value system, right? So
dance is a big way to start to speak to that.
Yeah.
It's, as I mentioned, like I'm seeing there's some stuff in the corner of my room here that probably don't look good.
It's, I don't see anything.
Volleyball.
There's a guitar.
It looks disheveled for people if they're listening or watching.
I don't think
Tune
they're
to the video because you see Aaron's disgusting slob.
I think you look great, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah. So dance is one of those things where it's like just another one of those prongs that you can start to look at,
Yeah.
that it loosens up your existential perspectives on the world as well.
Absolutely.
Our movement becomes our mind, and our mind becomes our movement. It's the same thing, I think. And so you can start to speak to some of these psychological aspects of yourself or emotional parts of yourself just through going out and like having a wiggle.
Right. Well, I know I listened to your last podcast, and your guest talked about the Bushmen, how they, they don't really, when he observed the Bushmen, they weren't really doing exercise. They were just moving, and they were enjoying the movement, and they were, and he started talking about a conservation of energy, which I thought was really interesting, because that's something that, like it should be our natural inclination to conserve our resources that way with movement, right? But we actually override that quite often. And so we lose our intuition in some ways with it, right? I thought
one
that
of
was
the things,
interesting.
one of the things so upon re-listening to that, I don't know, I said something like a wolf wolfs as well as it can. Like, you don't need to teach a wolf to wolf.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need to teach a deer to deer. You don't need to teach a buffalo to buffalo. It just buffaloes. It does it.
Yeah.
Whereas human beings, we've kind of gone out and we've entered into this new reality, our ego, or us thinking that we're important and we should be kind of leading this life that doesn't really fit our natural biology. It's almost like we're having to teach ourselves how to human. We're become separate from that.
Yeah.
So but with that, we still have all the tools. It's just I think sometimes you need to put yourself into a different environment. Like I choose to live near the beach, and I choose to live in a community that has people that are doing weird stuff with their bodies and creating weird art, and there's contact improv and dance class and just stuff like that. I can ride my bike places, and so to me it's worth whatever the amount is. Like thankfully I'm able to follow my values and be paid for it, which is like such a blessing and so tremendous. And I think there is something to starting from that point of what serves my highest values from an environmental perspective. If I'm going to be sitting in my car all the time to get from place to place, I'm going to be stressed out. I'm going to be blasting myself with EMF and all the bullshit. I'm stuck into that hunched over position. Right. And then I show up, I'm expressing myself in this broken mold. So then I get more broken results back. So sometimes it takes a little bit of responsibility to kind of like treat yourself like a child. If you were sending your kid off and be like, I want to go to a Waldorf school, I want to go somewhere he can express himself.
Right.
So you can do that with your own self and say, okay, it's an extra $300 to live in this place, but I get to ride my bike all month. Yeah. Everywhere I go, I ride my bike for $300. So that's $10 a day for me to get to ride my bike everywhere I go. That's to me is like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So certain things I think we can start to invest in ourselves. Like, look at yourself truly as an investment. It's your own financial portfolio. You are an investment, Allison and Maya. That's all. I'm done. That's all.
Okay, we're done.
Yeah, drop the mic.
So, with the values that you take in terms of what's worth your time and what's worth your thinking, like basically what you're doing in a day. So I noticed some of your YouTube videos, you talk about the habits of when you wake up in the morning and what you do and how you feel, and kind of give people the idea of, what you start your day off with is going to be what your whole day might project into. So can you talk a little bit about why that's important?
Man, oh man. So this is stuff that I'm kind of stumbling up in on the real relevance of it, kind of like late in the show. But I have gotten into a pretty consistent morning routine of sorts, which changes. Like I just got back from Austin, Texas, and my morning thing completely flipped up, and that's totally okay. That's a part of adaptation. I think if we become too strict and rigid in doing things the perfect way, you just become kind of like a turd to be around. Like it's obnoxious.
They call that atypical.
Yeah, right.
Atypical. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and I think that it's feels like I found specifically with journaling recently, I put a lot of like posts about journals and such because I think that it's such a powerful thing to start with what you're grateful for in the day. Just as an example, it could be whatever feels good to you. But what I found with that is as we invest in those specific practices, whatever they may be, they start to grow. So what I found is when I first started journaling, I feel like such a dweeb talking about it, but when I first started journaling about the crap that I'm grateful for my day to day, all of a sudden, like months later, I'm like, oh, I'm grateful for more crap. And the crap is like emotional crap and relationship crap. It's not just like materials. So that is one component. As I think some of these things that we might not take so seriously at first, if we do put a little bit of energy into it, they start to grow. And just in general, I think it's a similar conversation of riding your bike to the meeting. You arrive to the meeting and you're like, you got nitric oxide filling through your veins. You're all vascular. You're a little more tan. You're like upbeat. You like crush that meeting as opposed to sitting in traffic for the meeting. So that's kind of like a micro example of your day. If you start the day and you nailed it, you feel good, you worked out, it's like you almost like lived your day before 10 a.m.
Yeah.
You're like, everything else is just extra credit. If you can get in that flow, I think it's a really big deal.
And starting with gratitude is a really good way, I think, for anybody to get started. It's really easy, even if you just think of one thing, and it can be different each time, or it could be small. It could be just like, hey, the floor is warm under my feet. It feels really good. I'm really grateful for that right now.
Yeah. Also being grateful for stuff that hasn't happened yet either.
I like that too. Yeah, because then you're planting the seed in a way. That's fantastic. And then if you can get into meditation, I just start with like a 9-minute meditation every morning. That's really kind of all I could start with and hold my attention to right now. And so I just consistently try to do that. Doesn't happen every time, but for the most part, So I think that's helpful too, because it just kind of does get me. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'll be like, I got to do this and this and this, and all these things are already running through my head. And then I just sit down and meditate, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good. I can, start the day now. So just having, like you said, something that you can fall back on each morning to get it started to feel balanced is a really good idea. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Joe Dispenza's work at all?
I do vaguely. Did you had him on your show?
No, I'd love to.
I feel like I know the name, but I can't think of who he is.
I'll have my assistant person start stalking him probably this week. We would like to.
We're working on getting an assistant, by the way. That's one seed we're planting. So yeah.
That's another great example of ways that you can invest in yourself. That that's one of those, another kind of like potentially maybe takeaway point is you only have so much energy in a day.
Right.
And so if you are, this is I'm all hopped up on Demartini right now. So because I was just like studying, I went to a workshop with him recently.
What does he teach?
Just essentially a lot of stuff. He's considered a polymath. I think he considers himself that, which he is. He's like into a whole lot of shit.
Right.
So he's really big on like wealth building and things of that nature. He's huge in the world of self-development. He's kind of like he's on a level of like a Joe Dispenza or guys like that. And that's one of the things that he mentions in there is figuring out what your 3 to like 4 or 5 highest values are. Really, he's got a little test thing that you can fill out, and then from there, what are the other 29 things that you feel like you have to do throughout the day? If you can cut 24 of those out and just focus your energy on those top 5, then you can start to really build those top 5. But most of us, we end up getting lost in our email, we get lost in our messages, get lost in our Instagram or whatever it may be, and then you don't have any energy to write that article. I'm talking about myself. And so figuring out, okay, I have this compression right now. I feel good. Had some coffee, went for a run, did my thing, got pressure. Everything you do becomes kind of like potentially a leak if it doesn't serve your highest values. I'm like, beating the dead horse with that, using that word, but I think it's good. And then if you are tapping into the things that actually serve they make you feel enlivened, then it kind of has the inverse. That's like paying money back into the account.
Right.
So every moment throughout the day that you're doing some bullshit that doesn't serve your highest values, then that's kind of like you're paying on credit in a way. Last little thing, sometimes it is a relevant thing to start to do kind of like to recognize that what you're doing presently is serving your highest values in an indirect way. But you need to come clear with that. So you might be working some crappy job at Walmart or whatever it may be, and as you're doing that, you're investing in your certification to do the things so you can teach people how to be fill in the blank. So it's just really getting tuned into every moment that I'm here, I'm kind of distributing energy, taking in and taking it out, and just understanding, having like a come to Jesus moment of where you're investing is, I think, really important.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic, because that is a big issue with people is energy management. It's similar to money management in some ways, because
there's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, money is just a translation of energy.
Yeah,
and it doesn't mean like it's paper. It's bullshit. It's butt wipe. It has the only reason it has meaning is because it's this expression of energy in quotations that we have. But it's all the same stuff. They're all, it's very similar.
What is something that you're looking forward to in the future that you want to be here? I know that you're in the present moment kind of person, but what would you say is on your value system right now for the top 5?
Top 5. So top 3 at least are content creation. So I'm writing a book right now, and I actively update Instagram. I made a decision to do that a few months ago, where I treat Instagram like an investment or a business, and so I actively work with that every day. Before I had resistance around that because I thought it was silly. I've dropped all that, and I see it now as it's a professional. It's a professional obligation that I've taken up, or opportunity, you could say. So content creation. So creating videos for people, creating articles. The other one is research and self-development. I love to read and learn more about this whole body-mind relationship and things of that nature. And then self-development is, I'm going to a kirtan thing tonight where we're going to sing and dance and do stuff like that. I just got back from the gym, so I lifted some weights and did some random stuff. So those parts of my day, those are very fulfilling. I'm building. I can feel that progress happening. The other one is networking, relationships and connections. So that's something that I invest myself into because I couldn't as well. There's certain relationships and connections that it needs to be from you. You can't outsource that and say to somebody else. And so those are the main things that I put my focus on. So relationships, self-development and research, and then content creation or creation, you could say. There might be some other stuff in there too, but I think those are the main ones.
So do you still meet with people one-on-one, or do you now just do, okay.
No, No, I see clients.
Oh, okay.
And so, go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, I was going to say, how was that transition from when you moved from Bend to Venice Beach? Were you able to pick up clients pretty quickly when you moved there?
Yeah.
That's great.
So with the podcast is really helpful. So I was kind of getting to speak about moving down here before, so I actually had that kind of lined up. And I see clients as a means of staying sharp with it as well. It's something that I don't want to become just like a guy that talks about things, and it's like, what gives you the authority to talk about this thing? It's like, well, because I talk about things a lot. I'd rather I want to maintain that connection of, I actually work with people and we have these experiences together, and it's a craft. It's just like learning a dance or learning a martial art. Body work, I think body work is really cool. I think it's the depth of working with someone in that capacity, using your hands, manual therapy, or the tone of your voice, or the conversation, or the environment, all of that. It's magic. Like you don't really actually know what's happening. It's all very, very similar to like a shamanistic experience. Yeah. So that practice to me is like, I'll spend the rest of my life doing that. I'm not going to stop doing that.
Yeah. I can tell you're really passionate about it. Go ahead.
And so you do shiatsu, and or you Kind of. Okay.
I used to do
Are
that.
you?
I used to have bars up on my ceiling in an office in Oregon. So I'd like walk on people. It's really fun. But no, so Rolfing is something that I went to school for, but I'd been doing body work for several years before that. I'm really enamored by various movement practices, and so learning. So with like the podcast, for example, I get to pick on the brains of so many different people, and so that it has to influence my perspective on working with clients. So when I'm working with someone, one of the first questions I'll ask is, how is your sleep? And figuring out, it's like, are you excited about waking up in the day? Like, if you're not, we need to figure that out before we start thinking about your shoulder girdle carriage. Or maybe your shoulder girdle carriage will kind of light the fuse to start thinking about those other things. But you're always working with the whole organism. There's no such thing. If you're working with someone that thinks that you're like a mechanical machine, sometimes they can have value actually. But in general, they're accidentally having value. Like
Right.
They're focused on a thing and they're living within a dogma. They're effective within that dogma, but the reality of it is so much greater than what we think that we're working with. So if you start to pull that veil back a little bit and you see like, wow, this is like a living, breathing organism. I don't even know what this is. I don't know what I am. But we can change shit.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I have to say, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, he just said it a lot, so that's good.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, we don't know what we are, but
that's
we
such a
definitely
great
think we're
statement.
something.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
something.
Yeah, we think we're something, but I think that something is the 1%.
Yeah.
I think that it's a similar thing. How it's like the 1% of the wealthy few or whatever, and the 99% of everybody else. I think that all of that, those are all analogous with ourself from a psychological perspective as well.
Yeah.
There's the 1% that governs the whole. In reality, there's this 99% of a universe behind your eyes that you just don't ever look into because you're so occupied paying your cell phone bills, and trying to get laid and trying to look cool and trying to validate yourself. But the reality of things, so that's like that survival mechanism that most everyone, so 99% of people are probably stuck in that survival mechanism. It's all those patterns. I think the illusion that I live in, you'll see them consistently throughout everything else. If you see one pattern somewhere, it's probably elsewhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Freaking out.
So yeah, and so do you think the path to opening yourself up to that 99% that we don't get to would be opening our creativity or our getting closer to our creative self?
Yeah,
in
I think
some ways?
meditation's a big one.
Yeah.
I think plant medicine's a big one too. I don't know if you guys talk about stuff like that, but
Oh yeah.
good.
Maya's had more experience than I have with that, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it needs to be that. Speaking of Jamie Wheel, like the states of ecstasis, that's the Stealing Fire book reference. That's any kind of states that you can access that are kind of ecstatic states throughout the day. It could be sex, it could be breath, it could be psychedelics, it could be extreme sports, it could be meditation. All of those create an opportunity for a pattern reset. If we're stuck running on momentum, which all of us are, even like I know that I'm on momentum right now, and it's kind of a check every now and again, like, is this a heart-centered conversation that I'm having? And so kind of pulling back and just checking yourself, like, is what I'm doing right now heart-centered? And that's like a crazy, wacky, new agey type of thing. But you could replace that with anything. Does it feel true? You could say, if you don't like language like heart-centered.
Well, I think that's great because I was actually just thinking about that right like an hour before the podcast, before we recorded this, thinking about how like you have to keep, well, I know for myself, I get my blinders on and I start going and I'm like just getting things done, and not really being in the moment or present with things. And I can tell when I start to veer off a little bit, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I need to bring it back to myself and realize, bring it back to what's important to me, what matters most, right?
Yeah.
And I have to keep going back to that. I mean, so I think it's just a process, right, of just keeping that awareness, because we can easily get pulled just onto those tracks, and just keep going like a locomotive.
Yeah.
But yeah, you gotta slow down and take it in, because you'll miss it all.
Yeah, slow it down.
Yeah. But yeah, that's great. I just totally went off in another place just right there.
That's okay.
It was your moment.
I could fill in, but then I also like the idea of like having space and silence and all that. So sometimes upon recording conversations,
that's
the sensation
to
to keep going is like,
well, maybe you can
that's
give
hard to
me
listen to.
some perspective on that, Aaron, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Is and Maya and I talked about this the other day. Is with the podcast, it's brought our awareness to how we're speaking and the space that we like, our uncomfortableness around having space between our conversations, right? And just filling in the gaps. So this is something that we've started working on. What is your perspective on that? Like, as you've done your show, you're like into almost 200 episodes. What have you learned about yourself in that regard?
I have had the tendency of intending on asserting myself to let others know that I am smart, or let others know that I, whatever, I'm an expert or whatever bullshit. And now I'm still dealing with my own demons, I'm sure, and I have more resistance around that. So now I'm in like more like self-mocking phase of things.
That's great.
We call that sarcasm. Yeah. JP Sears told us a lot about his own journey about that, and why he came into that knowing of the guru monster that comes out inside you, which, when you're trying to do your best to give great information to people, you end up forgetting that you don't relate to people on a certain level. And, you kind of sever the relationships that maybe you've had, or you've actually created fake relationships based on some image that someone has of you. And it's good to kind of unravel that and just remember that you're as human as everyone else, and that you're just sharing a lot of great information that maybe someone may know or may not know.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that just like in general, if people are curious about public speaking and things of that nature, slowing down your language makes you seem like more authoritative. I'm kind of emphasizing it a little bit right now, so it might make me seem like I'm an asshole because I'm talking about it as I do it. And changing your tonality, so if you go into, if I start talking a little bit higher and I start going a little bit faster, then all of a sudden it seems like maybe I just don't really quite trust what I'm saying and I'm a little bit nervous.
Right.
So if you can slow it down, all of a sudden people have this sensation of like, oh, this guy's in control, or girl's in control, or whatever. And also being brave enough to be comfortable with pauses. And that's like a really valuable thing. Everything that we're speaking about now is metaphoric for everything else. So if you're not into public speaking, that's fine, which you are. If you ever talk, you're a public speaker.
Right.
But it relates to everything. Having that, being with a partner is a really like obvious example. If you always feel like you have to give, it gets weird and awkward. So sometimes it's like having that space and really just being comfortable with just sitting in silence. I think that we can convey that through a public speaking event as well.
I find that the next level of change could be the sarcasm creates comedy, and the comedy creates that sense of I'm trying to connect with you, but I'm not so wanting to connect everything, because as I get into public speaking and I could do it more often, a lot of times that kind of takes into where's the boundaries of people I don't know and where are the boundaries of people I do know. And do you notice any of that yourself?
I think in general it makes sense. Well, Tim Ferriss has a thing where he talks about writing articles and such. He wants to speak, I think, like 10%. He wants to have 10% people that are raving, highly engaged with what he's doing. So I think that's one approach, is to not try to appease to everyone and just be a weirdo in your one specific topic. And then that creates that space for the folks that's really what they want to attach onto that. and then they become your, raving devotees or whatever, if that's what you're looking for. Hopefully it's not. But that's one thing. That's one perspective, is to look at it and say, okay, I want to go deep in this. I just want to have kind of like, there's a guy called Jack Kruse, who I bet you guys are familiar with. He's like that. He has these raving devotees, like he's, as far like people that I have on my podcast, he has one of the smaller followings, like by far, of the people that I have on, but every one of his episodes get downloaded like through the roof, because the people that do follow him, like everyone's like, every word he says, I want it. So I think that is one perspective on it. Then there's also the perspective of wanting to speak to the lowest common denominator. That might not be the right language for it, but being able to speak, simplify things, realize that whatever it is that your expertise is, you've been in your brain for the last 15 years about fill in the blank thing, recognizing that someone's going to have a first glance at this and not know you at all, and not have any kind of back experience with that. So pulling yourself out of your expertise and realizing that someone, being able to speak to that person that doesn't have the 15 years of digging into all these wormholes. So I think there's different perspectives on it. I think it's, play with it is the big thing. See what your audience is and what people actually resonate with you.
Hey everybody, Thrive Market is my new favorite online store. It sells all the top organic and healthy products at wholesale prices, 25 to 50% off, and ships straight to your door. Thrive Market has all the top premium, healthy, and organic products that I usually get from a grocery store, but unlike your typical organic and non-GMO products that are marked up to premium prices, Thrive Market sells the same premium products at wholesale prices. So how do they do that? Thrive Market cuts out the middleman and works directly with the brands, and then they pass all the savings on to their members. Members get everyday wholesale pricing at 25 to 50% off the best healthy and organic premium products for just $60 a year. Just to put it into perspective, I made back my membership in savings within my first 2 orders. This is average for members, and there's a membership guarantee. And even better, for every paid membership, Thrive Market donates a membership to a low-income family, veteran, or teacher. So together, we are all making healthy living affordable for everyone. That's a company I am honored to support. And if you support Thrive Market that way, you can support our podcast, and we would appreciate it so much. So check out Thrive Market today. Head over to our affiliate link below this video and on our website at pureenergypdx.com. Now, without further ado, back to the show.
So I like doing, therapeutic type work as like a gift, as a means of connecting with people. So everybody, I recommend learning how to fly somebody. I got another name drop. A really close buddy is called Jason Niemer. Okay. He's the guy that founded AcroYoga. I would recommend folks look into him. He's super rad resource. And so he came up with this thing called AcroYoga that a lot of people are familiar with now, probably. And just as a means of connecting with somebody, if someone's got back pain, if someone's got hip thing, whatever it is, and you could say, hey, I could put you up my feet and kind of decompress your spine and mobilize your hips a little bit. We'll breathe together. We're not going to talk. We're just going to kind of have like a moment, and you're going to trust me a lot because I'm literally holding you upside down off the ground. So you can just blast through all of these rapport building operations within a few seconds of putting somebody upside down on your feet. It also creates a memorable experience. So that's like something like you mentioned, I honestly didn't remember that we did that because I do that with like a lot of folks, but you remembered, we should have memorable experiences. We don't need to be scared of weird stuff.
Right.
And so having something like that where it's like, I flipped Obama upside down on my feet. It was great. It's like Obama remembers you now.
Right. Never forget that.
I'd mess with all the different things like acrobatic silks and the Lear wheel and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm like a average C at most of that stuff. But I like to play with all of it. Anything that just gets you into a more non-linear, irregular type movement, I think is great. Yeah. And linearity is really important as well. We don't want to be dogmatic about non-linearity. It's like that's the tendency.
Unless you're going to fly to work, it's a little different.
Yeah, right. But so figuring out how can I start to integrate more aligned movement practices into my drive to work. So as I'm sitting in the car, there's things that I can do to keep my spine neutral, keep it long and stacked. There's things that I can do to keep my hips hinged. So we can start to integrate those patterns into everything that we do. That's the main drive of the whole align thing.
Right. And so that's what I was just kind of playing with, is that, unless we have silks that are kind of connecting ourselves to our work, we're not going to be really kind of doing that kind of movement on a daily basis. So,
but I'd recommend getting them in your living room or of your bed.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
yeah, so there's it's like these things that you're like $65 and 45 minutes away of having one of the raddest chiropractor, physical therapist, massage therapist hanging up over your living room, but you don't do it. So if you are complaining about your back pain, your knee thing, or the fact that you feel under energized or whatever it is, like, what are you doing about it?
Right.
The things that can change it are not that far away.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to do something different every day if you can. Something that would challenge you, put you in a different space, awareness, whatever it is. So it's good to try something. Yeah.
Well, Aaron, do you have any workshops coming up? Or I know you do a lot of different conferences and.
You're not going to release. When are you going to release this? Probably not soon enough. I'm doing a thing this coming Thursday at Bulletproof Labs in Venice.
Oh, this Thursday. Well, it'll be released next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, some people will miss that. It was great. I promise. It was amazing. You missed out. It was like probably one of the best experiences in anyone's lives. And it's over now. And then after that, I'm doing a thing at PaleoFX in Austin. And I have a couple like little things around here in LA where I'm teaching at a yoga studio and stuff like that. But the bigger things are PaleoFX is coming up. And then I gotta look and see. But those that's kind of what I have. And if people do have interest in going to PaleoFX, I have tickets on my website that's. I think I get a discount. Actually, no promises. I'm pretty sure I get some kind of like discount or something like that. So they can go to the website on my podcast page. It's advertised on there. Yeah.
Well,
can you get? Are you got anybody on your podcast that coming up that they should be paying attention to?
Oh man, so many good people. I don't even know.
I want to say that Aaron has the most amazing guests, and I've been listening to your podcast for a long time. I have to say that. I think I first discovered you through Chris's podcast, Tangentially Speaking, and I was like, oh, he's in Bend. I need to connect with him, and then years went by, and then you moved to Venice, and I was like, then I ended up meeting you at AHS in Seattle, so we finally did meet after all that time, but but I have really enjoyed it, and I have to say that you do have some incredible guests on your show, so if you guys definitely check out Aaron's podcast, because it's really, there's some great information on there. So you're doing a great job. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What would you change about it? What would you critique? What would be, was there anything that you would want more of or less of?
Gosh, I don't know.
You're on the spot.
I know. I can't tell you. I don't know, Aaron. I'd have to think about that a little bit longer, but,
ponder on it. I'm always open to evolving things.
I like the, what I can tell you what I like about it. I like the, informalness of it, I guess, that it's a conversation, because that, for me, that's why I like listening to podcasts. I don't like listening to overly produced shows, so I like conversations. I like listening to people and feeling like I'm sitting there in the conversation with
right.
people.
You're a voyeur. It's creepy.
I'm a voyeur.
We just didn't get invited to the conversation.
I know.
That's
No.
No, that's really important. I think that that's like, I call it profound bullshit. Like we just I want to do like kind of like be in that balance or yin and yang between profundity and just like goofing off.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's much more listenable.
Yes.
Because most things, like we don't need more information. We
Exactly.
need more, again, heartfelt connection. So if you can have that connection with somebody and get to record it. That's another thing. Like having my little box, my little recording box, it's a little briefcase with all the stuff in there.
Yeah.
I feel like that's magic too.
Yeah.
Everything's
absolutely.
magic.
Yeah.
Carry this little box around and like capture these moments and these experiences with people.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, you do a great job of that.
Thanks.
So, yeah.
Appreciate that. It's awesome.
Yeah. So
I should get that one too.
Yeah. So
It's silly that
Aaron,
I don't. I might have it actually. I'm not sure. Type in Align podcast and see what happens.
hold on. Yeah, let me make sure.
You gotta sort that out.
Okay. You're so
It's all
funny.
mine. It's all
Oh my
mine.
God.
I need to look that up. I feel like we should cover that base years
It's
ago.
aligntherapy.com/podcast if you want to check Aaron's podcast out. But if you want to check out his services, just go to aligntherapy.com. Well, it's so good to see you again, Aaron.
Good to see you
You're
too.
definitely
Bye.
uplifting. So thank you for uplifting us today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, let me know when you make it out here.
I will.
If you see Mr. Rion, tell him I said what up, and I will look forward to seeing you guys soon.
All right. Bye, Aaron.
Sweet.
Bye.
All right.
Ciao.